I'm here today on a tour of Brooklyn and the Bronx with Brooklyn Giro. We're here at Yankee Stadium, and this is Robbie. Clearly a man of taste with his on-one bike all the way from Sheffield.
This first stop was at the City College of New York, founded in 1847, and was the first free public college in the US. From there we headed down the hill to Hamilton Grange, which was Alexander Hamilton's house. From there to a place called Strivers Row in the St Nicholas Historic District. So this was built by a guy called David King Jr. in the 1890s, thinking that he could build nice townhouses for affluent whites, except nobody wanted to buy them. And he refused to sell them to African Americans until the Depression hit, and then he had no choice. So that changed in 1920, and it became kind of a place for up-and-coming people to move to. After that, we headed south down Malcolm X Boulevard to 125th Street, and then from there to the Adam Clayton Powell Square and statue. So this guy, who's the first African American to be elected to Congress. After being at the square, we left there and headed north on Adam Clayton Boulevard. And along here we then actually left Manhattan Island for the first time on the trip. So this was to head over the McCombs Dam Bridge and from there to Yankee Stadium, which you saw in the opening. It was kind of busy. There was a game about to start. Would have been great to stop and go in, but you know, with the bikes and things, that didn't really work. So we just had a couple of minutes just to look around and soak up the atmosphere before heading off, trying to weave our way through all the crowd. Police were kind enough to close off all the roads around the stadium, so cycling was easy as we went through all the people heading to the game. We then headed east on 161st Street over one of the main roads in the Bronx called Grand Concourse, and just on the other side we took a left onto Sheridan Street, and there's a small sandwich shop called Sheridan Market where we picked up some lunch for later in the day. We were then back on the bikes and north to a part of the Bronx called High Bridge. It is quite high. There was some hills we had to go up to get there. I think Robbie took some delight in making us go up some hills. When you get through there, you get to the High Bridge. So this connects the Bronx with Washington Heights in Manhattan and goes over the Harlem River. So we didn't go over the bridge. We turned around and headed back through the park and then carried on down to the river, so we could take a look at it from underneath. So we rode under the bridge, and then the road became a cycle path, and that took us along to these two tower blocks called River Park Towers, one of the tallest buildings in the Bronx. So we went up a ramp and suddenly we were in the lift. Yeah, it saves climbing, I suppose, and then wheeled them out through the lobby and back out into the sunshine. So back on the bikes and carried on heading north. So this time we headed back up another hill. There's hills everywhere in the Bronx. And we went to the Bronx Community College. There is a colonnade with a Hall of Fame for Great Americans. So this is 102 statues of American heroes. So we had a wander through there, and they're arranged in different sections with authors and editors, businessmen, inventors, missionaries and explorers, philanthropists and reformers, clergymen and theologians, scientists, engineers and architects, lawyers and judges, musicians, painters and sculptors. We then had a bit of lunch and then back on the bikes and started pedaling again. We headed over towards the New York Botanical Garden, which is just located just to the north of the Bronx Zoo. It's 250 acres in the middle of the Bronx with about 1 million plant varieties. Unfortunately, it's not terribly bike friendly, and when we realised we couldn't take the bikes in, we thought we'd actually just keep on going. So we headed over to Fordham University, where it happened to be graduation day, and they didn't mind us wandering through as long as we pushed the bikes. We headed out the other side up to a place called Poe Park. Edgar Allan Poe lived in the farmhouse here from 1846 to 49, when it was all surrounded by fields, and he moved up here to escape from the pollution of the city. We then headed west back over the Broadway Bridge to Manhattan Island. And the first stop was at the Columbia University Athletics Complex, where there's a view across the Spoitendoville Creek to the Big Sea Rock. So here there's a number of big rocks or cliffs that you can jump off into the Harlem River. There's lots of videos on YouTube of people doing this, and some of it just looks crazy. We then headed off through Inwood Hill Park and over towards Washington Heights, where we stopped briefly by the Lowe's Theatre from the 1930s, which is now the United Palace of Spiritual Art. And then from then on to Roger Morris Park near 160th Street West to the Morris Jamel Mansion. This is the oldest surviving house in Manhattan and was built in 1765. Just next to it is a place called Sylvan Terrace, and this is a row of 20 three-storey 19th century wooden townhouses with a cobbled street, which was quite an unexpected find in the middle of Manhattan. We then went to the Hispanic Society Museum and Library in Boricure College before turning west onto the Hudson River and the Riverbank State Park. We then took the Riverside Drive to the General Grant National Memorial, which is the largest mausoleum in North America and is dedicated to Ulysses S. Grant, the 18th President of the US. We headed back through Columbia University campus and then finally back to our starting point.